At my daughter's graduation, something happened that I'll never forget. It wasn't the speeches or the caps in the air, it was what her stepdad said and what she did after. We were in the school gym, packed wall to wall, parents fanning themselves with programs, teachers lined up in the front row. My daughter, Aria, was up on that stage in her blue gown and honor cords, looking radiant and proud. I was in the third row, hands clenched in my lap, trying to hold back tears. 18 years of sacrifice had brought us here. Every late-night shift, every skipped meal, every quiet cry in the bathroom so she wouldn't hear. It had all led to this. Then Greg stood up. He didn't ask. He just walked up to the mic after the final speeches. He smiled, straightened his tie, and said, "Before we head out, I want to take a second to thank the real parent who made this happen." My heart jumped. For a second, I thought, could he be talking about me? Then he added, "Let's give it up for the man who kept her focused, who taught her discipline, who showed up every step of the way." And everyone clapped. Loud, long, full applause. Some parents even stood. He looked right at the crowd, soaking it in. He nodded like a man who had just won something. I sat there, frozen. My chest was tight, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked at Aria on the stage. She didn't smile. She didn't clap. She just stared at him. He kept going. "She's a brilliant girl, and I'm proud to call her my daughter. I've done everything I could to make sure she had a better future. And today, I think we can all agree it paid off." More clapping. I didn't move. I couldn't. I had spent years doing the invisible work, working night shifts as a nurse while she slept, skipping birthdays to pay for textbooks, fighting for her when teachers underestimated her. He had been around for 5 years. I had been there since day one, and now in a single moment he erased it all. But then something happened. Aria stood up again. She walked back to the mic. Slow, steady, heels clicking against the wood floor. The crowd was still smiling, still buzzing from his speech. Greg stepped aside, probably thinking she was about to thank him too. But she looked right at me, and she said, "I want to tell you what he doesn't want you to know." The room went silent. People sat back down. You could hear the air conditioning hum above us. And just like that, everything changed. My name is Janelle Ortiz, and I raised my daughter, Aria, by myself for the first 13 years of her life. I didn't plan on doing it alone, but plans rarely survive reality. Her father left when she was 4. No phone calls, no child support, just a blank space where a man should have been. At first I was angry, then I was numb. Then I just got busy. I worked night shifts as a nurse, long ones, the kind that leave your back sore and your eyes dry. I'd come home to find her asleep on the couch with her homework on her lap. She never complained. She learned early that we didn't have the luxury of easy. When she was in middle school, I used to write little notes and put them in her lunch, just a sentence or two. Something like, "You're stronger than you think," or "I'll always be proud of you." Sometimes I'd get home late and she'd have left a Post-it on the fridge for me. "Drink water. You forgot yesterday." That was our rhythm. Quiet care, unspoken understanding. She was never just my daughter. She was my anchor. Then Greg came into our lives. We met at a hospital charity gala. He was charming, confident, successful, said all the right things. I hadn't dated in years, and it felt nice to be noticed. He took an interest in Aria right away, helped her with homework, taught her to drive. He liked being seen as the hero, and at first, I wanted to believe he was. We got married 2 years later. Things shifted. He was never openly cruel, but he had this way of making me feel small. If I disagreed with him in front of Aria, he'd flash that tight smile and say, "Let's not confuse her." If I tried to talk about boundaries or parenting decisions, he'd shut me down with, "I think I know what I'm doing." He liked to call himself Dad at parent-teacher nights. I never corrected him. It felt petty. Aria never called him that, though. Not once. She stuck with Greg. Sometimes I wondered if she saw through him more than I did. Over time, the space between me and Aria started to stretch. She became more private, more quiet. I thought maybe it was just teenage growing pains. Maybe it was because she was busy with school. Maybe Greg was right when he said I needed to stop hovering. I convinced myself it was normal. But I still noticed the little things, like how she'd text me to say goodnight even if she was in the next room, or how she'd wait until Greg left the house to ask for advice, Or the time I found her crying softly in the bathroom and she just whispered, "I'm okay, I promise. Just tired." I didn't push. I gave her space. I kept showing up. The day she got her acceptance letter to NYU, she screamed so loud the neighbors thought something was wrong. I laughed and cried and danced with her in the kitchen. Greg was out of town for a conference. When he got home, he slapped her on the back and said, "Told you I'd get you there." She gave him a polite smile. I felt something sink inside me, but I said nothing. Graduation day came fast. I was nervous that morning, not just because it was a milestone, but because something about that day felt heavy, like it meant more than it should. I curled Arya's hair in the kitchen while she scrolled through her speech on her phone. She looked up at me once and said, "You okay?" I smiled and nodded. She didn't ask again, but her eyes lingered, like she didn't believe me. We arrived early. Greg was already shaking hands with the principal, making sure everyone saw him. I took a seat in the third row where I always sat, out of the spotlight, close enough to see everything, far enough not to be seen. When Arya walked across that stage, my heart swelled. She looked poised, fearless, brilliant. A piece of me wanted to run up there and hold her like I used to when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. But I stayed seated, hands folded tightly. I didn't know then what was coming. I didn't know that this graduation wasn't just hers. It was mine too. A moment I never asked for, never expected, and still can't fully explain. But it would begin with a single, stolen sentence from Greg, and end with Arya standing up to say the one thing I never thought I'd hear out loud. The gym buzzed with celebration. The bleachers were packed with families holding flowers. Programs rolled in their hands like scrolls. Teachers lined the stage in pressed suits and dresses, their smiles stiff from too many pictures. The school band played a hopeful tune. I scanned the crowd, trying to stay calm, trying not to cry. Arya sat with her classmates in the front rows, her blue cap tilted just enough to show her curls. I kept my eyes on her. I needed to see her in this moment to memorize it. She had worked so hard. We both had. When her name was called, my breath caught. Arya Ortiz, valedictorian. The principal shook her hand, and the crowd clapped politely. I clapped too, but my hands were shaking. She gave a small smile to the audience, then walked up to the podium with the speech she'd spent weeks writing. She adjusted the mic. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "Thank you for being here tonight. I want to start by thanking my teachers, my friends, and everyone who stood by me." Her voice was strong, her pace steady. "But more than anything, I want to thank the people who made this journey possible." She paused. I leaned in slightly, already knowing the answer, or thinking I did. She smiled toward the crowd. "To my parents, thank you for raising me, for pushing me, for loving me through everything. I wouldn't be here without you." People clapped again. My heart swelled with pride. I didn't need to be named. I didn't need a spotlight. That moment was enough, or so I thought. Just as the final speeches ended and the ceremony was winding down, Greg stood up. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask anyone's permission. He just stepped up to the podium like it was his right. I froze. The mic screeched slightly as he pulled it closer. Then he smiled, relaxed like a man used to being heard. "Before we wrap up tonight," he said, "I want to take a moment to talk about what it really takes to raise a child like Arya." Heads turned. Cameras went up. A few parents looked curious, others confused. I sat completely still. "It takes structure," he continued. "It takes someone who shows up, someone who doesn't let her slack off, who sets the bar high, someone who puts in the work day after day to make sure she stays on track." People began to nod along. I clenched my jaw. "I'm proud to have been that person," he said. "Proud to be the one who made sure she reached her full potential. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported me while I raised her." Applause broke out. Real applause. Not polite, scattered claps. Full, unfiltered applause. A few people stood. He stepped back from the mic, looking pleased, like he had given a gift to the world. I sat frozen in my seat. I wanted to scream, not because he wanted credit, but because he had rewritten the truth right in front of everyone and no one questioned it. For 5 years, he had played the part. And maybe that was enough for people who only saw what he wanted them to see. But I remembered the nights he belittled her for getting an A-. I remembered the time he mocked her for crying over a rejection letter. The silence in our house when he was in a mood, the way Arya's shoulders tensed when he entered a room. She never told me everything, but I saw enough. He hadn't raised her, he had controlled her, and now he was being applauded for it. I tried to swallow the bitterness. I didn't want to make a scene. This was Arya's day, not mine. If she wanted to let him have his moment, I could accept that. I could shrink a little more. I was used to it. But then Arya stood up again. She didn't smile. She didn't look at Greg. She walked to the podium slowly, her cap in one hand. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not pride, resolve. The crowd quieted. Whispers rippled through the bleachers. Someone asked, "Is she doing a second speech?" Someone else shushed them. She leaned into the microphone. "I want to tell you what he doesn't want you to know." And the room fell completely silent. The sound of Arya's voice through that microphone cut through the room like glass. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It was clear, focused, unapologetic. "I want to tell you what he doesn't want you to know." All the clapping stopped. You could hear a chair creak, a baby murmur in the back. Even the band kids in the corner went quiet. Greg shifted beside her. His smile faltered, but he kept it on his face like a mask that was beginning to crack. I sat motionless in the third row, staring at my daughter. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what she was about to say. I didn't even know if I wanted her to say it. Part of me hoped she'd stop, that she'd walk back to her seat and let the moment go. But I also knew this wasn't about me anymore. She wasn't doing this for applause. She was doing it because something inside her had finally decided to stop being quiet. She looked out over the crowd, then down at Greg. Her voice didn't shake. "He says he made this happen, that he was the one who showed up every day and raised me into the person I am." Greg stared back at her, still smiling, but now he looked like he was trying to figure out whether to laugh it off or stop her. He didn't move. Arya looked straight ahead, but the truth is, he came into my life when I was already halfway grown. My grades were already strong, my goals were already clear. My work ethic came from watching my mom get up every single morning before sunrise to go work a job that left her feet blistered and her eyes red. She never missed a shift. She never gave up. She made sure I had food, books, clean clothes, and time to study. She stayed up late proofreading my essays even after working 12 hours. When I failed, she never told me I wasn't good enough. She told me to try again. My throat tightened. I didn't move. I didn't want to ruin the moment. Arya kept going. Greg was a part of my life, yes, but he didn't raise me. He controlled me. He criticized me when I wasn't perfect. He reminded me constantly that I was lucky to have him, that I'd never get into college without him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A teacher in the front leaned forward, her expression stunned. Greg shifted again, this time with a clenched jaw. "He wants you to think he built me," Arya said. "But the truth is, he tried to take credit for something he never created." She turned and for the first time looked directly at me. "My mom is the reason I'm here. Not just at this ceremony. Here, in this life. She kept me together when I wanted to fall apart. She believed in me when no one else did. She made sacrifices no one saw and never asked for anything in return." Her voice cracked, just once, but she didn't stop. "She didn't come up here and talk. She never needed to, but I do." She walked away from the podium and stepped off the stage. Greg stood motionless as she passed him. His eyes followed her, but he didn't say a word. There was no applause this time. Only silence. Raw, heavy silence. Arya walked straight to me. She bent down, wrapped her arms around my neck, and held me like she used to when she was little, and the world felt too big. She whispered, "I saw everything, Mom." I always did. I couldn't speak. I just held her. Something deep inside me cracked open in that moment. Not from pain, but from the release of years of being invisible. Every time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Every night I had cried into my pillow so she wouldn't hear. Every sacrifice I made in silence was suddenly, publicly seen. She didn't just take back her story. She gave mine a voice, too. That was the moment the tide turned. Not just for her, for me. I don't remember breathing in those first few seconds after Arya hugged me. I just remember the way her arms wrapped around me and how tightly she held on. like she had waited years to say what she did, like letting go too soon would erase it all. The crowd stayed quiet. No one moved. No one clapped. There were no polite smiles or congratulatory nods. Just silence. Thick, undeniable silence. Greg was still standing beside the podium. I turned to glance at him. His arms were stiff at his sides, his eyes scanning the audience. He looked lost, stripped, like the stage he had stepped onto so confidently had vanished beneath his feet. For the first time since we had met, I saw him as he really was. Not charismatic, not clever, just a man who thought control was love and that performance was truth. And now he stood exposed in front of everyone who had once applauded him. Arya stepped back and looked me in the eyes. Her own were glassy, but she wasn't crying. She was proud. She had said what needed to be said, and now she was standing in it. I brushed a piece of hair behind her ear and said quietly, "Are you sure you're okay?" She nodded without hesitation. "I am now." We sat down together. I didn't look around. I didn't need to know who was whispering or shifting uncomfortably in their seats. All that mattered was sitting beside my daughter and holding on to the moment she gave me, not just as her mother, but as the person who had carried the weight all those years without needing recognition. Until now. The principal walked hesitantly back to the microphone and fumbled through a few closing remarks. He thanked everyone for attending. He congratulated the graduates again. He wished them good luck on their future journeys. His voice was steady, but you could tell he felt the shift in the room. We all did. As people began to gather their things and rise from their seats, no one looked at Greg. Not one person approached him. He lingered for a few seconds near the steps, maybe waiting for someone to say something or offer a smile. But they didn't. He turned and walked away without a word. I thought I might feel triumphant seeing him leave like that. I didn't. I didn't feel angry or vindicated. I just felt done. Like something inside me had closed that needed to stay closed. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Arya and I walked out of the gym together. The sun was setting, casting long golden streaks across the parking lot. She held her cap in one hand and the diploma in the other. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement, and every so often she glanced up at me with a small, quiet smile. We didn't say much. When we reached the car, she opened the passenger door and tossed her cap onto the seat. "I'm starving," she said. "Can we get burgers?" I laughed through the tightness in my chest. "Absolutely." We drove with the windows cracked open, the breeze rushing through, lifting strands of her hair and cooling my face. I didn't even realize I was crying until she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You never asked for credit," she said, "but I saw it all. I saw everything you gave up." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. She added, "I know he made you feel like you had to shrink, like your love wasn't enough, but it was. It always was." We pulled into the drive-thru and ordered 2 burgers, fries, and milkshakes. As we waited, she leaned her head against the window and said, "That wasn't just my graduation today. It was yours too." I let that sink in, because she was right. That night wasn't about revenge or shame. It wasn't about humiliating Greg or proving a point. It was about being seen. After years of silence, of letting someone else shape the narrative, my daughter had stood up and told the truth. And in doing so, she gave me something I didn't know I was still waiting for: recognition. Not in the form of a thank you or a speech, but something deeper. A daughter's love spoken loudly with no fear of consequence. It wasn't the ending I imagined. It was better. That night, after the ceremony and the burgers and the milkshakes, Arya went upstairs to shower and pack a few things for a trip she was taking with her friends. I stayed downstairs in the kitchen, staring at the graduation program still folded neatly on the table. Her name was printed in bold: Arya Ortiz, valedictorian. I ran my fingers over the paper, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of struggle, the sacrifices, the loneliness that came from being both mom and dad, nurse and cheerleader, protector and provider. There were so many times I had doubted myself. So many nights I had wondered if I was doing enough, or if love without money or prestige would ever be seen or remembered. But my daughter had seen it. She had remembered everything. And in front of a room full of people, she spoke the truth. Not just for herself, but for me. When Aria came back down with her overnight bag, she paused in the doorway. Her hair was damp, her face fresh. She looked like a young woman standing fully in her own power. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. "More than okay." She walked over and sat beside me at the kitchen table. "I didn't plan on saying all that, but when he started talking, like you weren't even part of the story, I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let them leave thinking that was the truth." I looked at her, searching her eyes for doubt or hesitation. There was none. "You didn't have to defend me," I said quietly. "I wasn't defending you," she said. "I was honoring you." I sat with that for a moment. Honoring. It was a word I hadn't associated with myself in a long time. I'd spent so many years fading into the background, not because I didn't care, but because I believed that real love didn't demand attention. I believed that showing up every day without applause was enough. And in many ways, it was. But sometimes, silence lets the wrong person write the story. Aria gave me back the story that night. She reminded me that I was never invisible, not to her. The next day, I started getting messages. A few parents who had been at the ceremony reached out. One mother said, "I wish I had spoken up the way your daughter did." Another wrote, "I've always admired you, even if I never said it. You did a hell of a job." It didn't matter if those words were late. What mattered was that they finally came. As for Greg, he didn't call. He didn't text. He left quietly, just like he had faded from Aria's heart long before that night. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to hold on to. Aria left for her trip later that afternoon. Before she got into the car, she hugged me and said, "Don't ever let anyone take away what you've built. Not ever again." I stood on the porch and watched her drive off. It felt like an ending, but not the kind that brings sadness. It was the kind that brings peace. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something in myself that had been missing for years. I stood taller, I spoke more freely. I didn't apologize for taking up space in rooms I had once shrunk in. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just living as someone who knew her worth had finally been seen. Aria and I still talk every day. When we hang up, she always says, "Love you, Mom, I mean it." And I always say, "Love you more." That's our thing. I used to think being a good parent meant staying quiet, sacrificing without being noticed, loving without asking for anything in return. But I've learned that being seen is not selfish. It's human. And sometimes, when you least expect it, the child you raise turns around and becomes your voice. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever poured your whole heart into someone and thought no one noticed, let me say this. They see you. Maybe not now, maybe not out loud, but they do. And one day, in their own words, in their own way, they'll tell the world what you meant to them. And when they do, it will change everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who showed up when no one else did, take a moment right now. Send them a message. Tell them thank you. Sometimes the quietest heroes need to be reminded they were never invisible. And if you felt something while watching this, share this video. Someone out there needs to hear it. Don't forget to like the video if it resonated with you. Leave a comment to tell me what part hit you the hardest, and subscribe to the channel for more real, raw stories just like this one. Thank you for listening. And to every parent, every caregiver, every person who's ever loved silently, you are seen.